My name is Sarah Horrocks. I'm the director of the Connected Learning Centre, which is based here in London. And I'm joined this morning by my colleagues Rowan Roberts and Peter Lillington, who are teaching and learning consultants at the Connected Learning Centre. And we're also delighted to be joined by our colleague from Sweden, Katarina Sperling, who is from the municipality of Norrköping and also working at Linköping University. So welcome, everyone. So you might be thinking, why have you got some people from London and some people from Sweden working together? We've been working with Katarina on a variety of Erasmus projects for the past 5 years. And one of those is called Empower to Learn. And it's all about personalisation. We're working together with partners from the Netherlands, from Belgium, from universities, and also from a CLC, a centre that supports teachers and schools in the Netherlands. And we've been working for several years now on this project around personalisation. We're going to go into more detail about it. When we began conceptualising the project, we drew heavily on the EU's DigiComp Edu framework, which is a framework supporting professional learning development and digital competencies of teachers. And we honed in very much on the section around empowering learners. So our project is very much about empowering learners, looking at those aspects of differentiation and personalisation. And you may be interested to check out, there's been an update actually this week in terms of the overarching DigiComp, which is for all citizens, and that is looking also very much at AI and the things that all citizens need to understand, and that obviously relates to personalisation.
So when we started the project, and that was nearly 3 years ago, it immediately became apparent, both from discussions amongst partners and from the survey of recent academic literature that we did at the start, that many people mean very many different things by the term personalisation, personalised learning. So you might like to consider at this stage what your take on personalisation is. And these keywords are from 2 recent sessions we had with teachers. So anyone got differentiation going through their heads? Yes? Maybe it's all about inclusion for everyone. Maybe it's about students' interests or learner voice. Okay, so relevance to learners is also what some people mean by personalisation. Perhaps you're thinking at a high level about systems, and maybe you're a learner yourself. I certainly am, thinking about a learner's perspective, or maybe you're thinking from the viewpoint of a teacher trying to manage all this. But for our project, for clarity, we realised early on we had to agree on a definition. So this is our vision for our project. I'm just going to read it out to you. So learning that empowers students to become active in their learning pathways, and that tailors their learning activities to meet their needs, abilities, and interests. And of course, when we started the project, the pandemic certainly wasn't on our radar, and we know that many teachers have used a range of tools and platforms for personalisation, well, before the pandemic, of course, and particularly during the period of remote learning. So in the project, we've had to make a selection of some different tools to focus on, and we know there are many, many tools and platforms out there. More about that in a moment, but first we want to consider the potential of tools that use AI, which are increasingly being promoted to schools. Katarina, I think. after you.
Thanks.
And this survey is from the World Bank and Ipsos, and interestingly, it shows that education is the area where people think that AI is going to make the most difference. And in our project, we kind of quickly got into the area of AI in education, not exclusively, and we're talking about personalisation in general. But interesting that there's this perception that AI is going to make a real difference in terms of education. And I'll say a little bit at the end about we're actually going to be doing a talk later today that hones in much more on AI. But this was part of our project as well.
Yeah, so I am also, as partner of this project, I also started my PhD on AI in education. And I was particularly interested to how these AI systems can personalize learning and support teachers. This picture, however, is just an illustration to show that children already use a lot of AI tools, and we as well, when they listen to music, when they watch movies, when they interact with their friends, when they try out Siri or whatever they do. And all this is captured, all this is measured, and they get feedback and tailored content accordingly. What is new, however, is that these systems and these technologies are getting into teaching aid software and in classrooms in learning management systems. And this is quite an area that is still unexplored and under research, in particular by educational researchers. So a very recent meta-study that consisted of 400 papers published between 2000 and 2019 shows that the most trending things in AI-ED research was machine learning coupled with learning analytics. So you can press the next picture. Sarah.
It's coming.
Coupled with learning analytics. And these two domains are very interlinked. Machine learning, I think many of you in this audience have a good idea what that is, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a subcategory of AI that is considered as the new generation of AI in education tool. And it's a way for computers to learn and predict from big data without being pre-programmed. So it's very data dependent. And learning analytics is a way of kind of introducing this data, for example, to predict if students will fail or drop out, how they feel. So all different kind of aspects are being visualized and made accessible for teachers, but also for, of course, administrative staff and so on. However, it's emerging technologies. We don't really know very much if it still improves learning and teaching. And in my work, I try to really see what happens when these tools are introduced in classroom. So this is just a really brief quote from a fieldwork that I did when we introduced a teaching aid in mathematics with machine learning algorithms that we wanted to see if the AI could personalize the content to the students. So I tried to observe what happened, and as you can see here, students can really quickly track if the system works or not, and if it doesn't work well for them in this case, they get quite frustrated and they test the system, so they put in kind of flawed data in it, And as one of the students said here, first I get super easy, then I get super difficult, then I get super easy again. They don't understand how it works. And I think what I can see in my work there are some ethical concern around not really understanding how these algorithms fully work. And it's also very obscure for the teachers in the classroom.
So as part of this project, we had to kind of digest a massive number of different examples of tools and practices and research and things like that. And while we were doing that, we realized that I think it was very helpful for us to have a little bit of a really quite simple framework through which to categorize all of these different ideas and these different ways of working with personalization. So these categories are not necessarily exhaustive, and also there's definitely overlap between them. And you can see that we've kind of put tools into each of these categories. But I think it's really important to make the distinction between a tool that is used for personalized learning and then like what kind of personalized learning and how it's used to personalize the learning. But just as a sort of helpful framework, we talked about tools that are kind of usable in one lesson, things that are kind of often used sort of as a way of using technology to support formative assessment. So quite frequently things that can just be kind of, you can just use them in one go kind of thing, like a standalone platform. Then these ones down here are all tools that are kind of linked to a specific subject area. And these are often used in a more sort of sustained way in a particular area of study. Sometimes they might be ways of giving teachers access to kind of data about the pupil's performance and their journey in that particular subject area. Sometimes there might be a little bit more involvement of the technology in actually shaping the journey through that subject area. An example of a kind of popular example of that would be Duolingo, which Sarah will mention a little bit more about later. We also talked about portfolio systems, and I think that this is quite an interesting one because you might not necessarily think of portfolio systems as being something that would personalize learning, because really they're about gathering information, gathering data. But actually, if a pupil is able to look at what they have gathered and look at their own work and organize it in a way that kind of reflects the way that they feel about it, it actually opens up a lot of possibility for personalization, which I'll talk more about in a moment. And then we also talked about kind of these complete management systems, so you kind of maybe a school-wide learning management system. Now, obviously, these things are really, I mean, as with all of them, they're just tools. These ones, I guess, provide more of a framework that can be used for personalization in a really wide variety of ways. Sometimes by just providing that structure, which teachers then use to plan the learning, but sometimes actually through embedding tools within those systems that can shape it as well. So I wanted to just show you a specific example. So GeoGebra was one of the ones on that list that was sort of linked to a specific discipline. And GeoGebra, if you haven't seen it before, is a free tool that you can use for sort of personalization in maths teaching. It's a really nice example because, as I said, it's free, and also because there are lots and lots of activities and lessons in a kind of great big database that you can search that have been submitted by different teachers. In a funny way, we're kind of personalizing teaching as well as personalizing learning, because as a teacher, you get to select what kind of activity and example you want to use, and you can also contribute to that community. So if there's something that you want that isn't there, then you can kind of add your idea to it as well. And then just to explain on the next slide how it kind of personalizes it and what you would see. So this is what you see as a teacher from the teacher dashboard. You can see all of your pupils connecting to the activity. You can see how far they've progressed through the activities, and you can also see whether they've got particular answers incorrect. So it's a really nice way of just getting a general overview of whether there might be a need to re-explain something, whether there might be a need to add more challenge, or to approach particular pupils for interventions, and whether there are any kind of misconceptions across the class. So I think, yeah, it's a really nice tool because it's such an easy thing to use, maybe on a kind of one-off basis, although you can kind of have a slightly more sustained use. But I think then the next example is a good example of a tool that I definitely think is more useful if you really think quite deeply about how you're going to be using it and why you're going to be using it. So I mentioned before that kind of a portfolio system can be an example of personalization. I was thinking particularly of a project that we featured as a case study in part of the Empower to Learn project. And that was a research project conducted by Rosendale Primary School, but it was a national research project. It was funded by the EEF, and it was called ReflectEd. And essentially, ReflectEd taught children metacognitive strategies for thinking about their own learning, and then showed children to sort of how to apply those strategies to their learning in maths and English. And they used Seesaw to capture and reflect upon and kind of codify their kind of journey through their learning in those different subject areas. I think it's important to think about the journey that the school went on to get to the point where they were using this tool. It actually wasn't the first tool that they chose to use for this project. They started with Evernote, but they ended up changing partway through. They just found that it worked slightly better for them and with the schools that they were working with. And then also, so the children are personalising their learning through the way that they record and reflect on their learning, and in terms of the way that they could like label things that they felt they needed more work on or request sort of input from their teacher. But they could share their work in a real variety of different ways. So you can, on Seesaw, if you're familiar with Seesaw, you may know that you can photograph something and add that to Seesaw, or you can type into Seesaw. You can even annotate pictures, you can like draw on top of them, and you can record your voice over the top of things or record video. So loads of different ways of kind of sharing your thoughts and sharing your ideas. And also it means that if you've done your piece of work on a piece of paper, you can take a photo of it and then record your voice over the top or annotate it to say what you think about it. So it was just one of those tools that had lots and lots of different functionality. And the important thing to think about, I think, is that it fit the needs of their project really well. And I think this is kind of a thing that we talked about a lot throughout this project, was that personalisation is almost kind of like a collaboration between the technology and the pupil and the educator or the teacher. And they all have to work well together. And I think it's more important to think about what you want to use the tool for than the tool itself. Obviously, I'm quite enthusiastic about Seesaw because it was so well suited to this project, but they didn't pick Seesaw first. They chose what their research project was about, and then they found the tool that kind of fitted it most effectively.
And probably the most common tool that adults will have used for personalised learning is probably Duolingo. And of course there is now the Duolingo Schools, which is the schools version. I'm sure, and actually should we just have a show of hands, who has used Duolingo? Okay.
I'm on a 36-day streak at the moment. It's doing things to my mind.
Yeah, part of our Erasmus projects, Peter's been trying to learn Finnish. But you know, in Duolingo Schools, as in the adult version, very much that personalisation through feedback and through encouragement. And interestingly, in the project, we've had some discussions with developers such as Sana Labs in Sweden, and it appears that maths and language learning are kind of where, in fact, kind of AI has most impact, and kind of it's easiest to use in a sense. More about that this afternoon.
Okay, personalisation could also mean inclusion, and in our project, we've got quite a lot of information about Binogi, which is a Swedish research and innovation project, and municipalities, local authorities and schools can join that, license it. And it's a great example of a product that was developed based on research, but in conjunction with teachers in the classroom as well. And it's emerged from a need to support newly arrived migrants in classes, or students that speak very little or no Swedish at all. And what it does is, you can see it features a multitude of short animated videos and lessons with activities, and that's across 13 curriculum subjects, including maths and sciences, Swedish, history and geography, religion, English, and others as well. And complicated key concepts and specific vocabulary are explained in playful and simple ways. And there are sounds, there's audio and subtitles available currently in 7 languages, Swedish, Finnish, English, Arabic, Somali, Dari and Tigrini, and some more languages are on the way too as well, about to be introduced. and personalisation also happens through the quizzes at different levels, and teachers have access, once again, to learning analytics on a dashboard and can monitor their students' progress and use it for formative assessment as well.
So that's been a bit of a quick tour through our Empower to Learn project. We'd be really grateful if you could check out our website, which is very much a kind of work in progress. It's a kind of project website. We would be really keen to hear about your experience with personalisation. We're going to have some questions in a moment. And we are also going to be running a free online seminar about our project on the 25th of May. There's a QR code there for you to sign up, so it would be great if you could join us. We'll go into a lot more detail in that online seminar.
And just to point out for London and UK viewers, Central European time, so make the time adjustment.
And we've also got a QR code there if you'd like some more information. Got our emails and Twitter handles there, so please do get in touch. And I think we've now got time for some questions.
I'm just wondering how you see teacher training changing to accommodate kind of personalisation.
Yes, that's a really good question, isn't it? Teacher training. Yeah, because one issue is there's a whole multitude of tools. We have had CPD as a focus in this project as well. So I don't know if one of my colleagues wants to say a little about the CPD aspect, the teacher training aspect.
I mean, I think it's when you're thinking about using technology, it's always about being critical. So I think it's about giving teachers the kind of critical skills as much as the digital skills, and maybe more than the digital skills. And I think it's always about fitting it with what your kind of existing pedagogy is, and making sure that you're not selecting something that's actually going to be out of kilter with your kind of ethos and theoretical approach to teaching.
Yes, however attractive the platform or tool seems to be, I think teachers really need to be supported in valuing their own professional judgment, knowing what's right for their students, and overriding perhaps what a tool is telling them or the dashboard is telling them, when they really have those skills and empathy with their students to know what's best. So it's a complex area, and we found the DigComp Edu framework quite a useful starting point or checklist just to think about different aspects. So, thank you.
But I think always with professional development for teachers, you know, your teachers in the room, it's got to be something that that's going to help your learners, that's going to help your students, going to help your children. So it's about kind of making sure that there's that buy-in. And I think also things like in subject areas, making sure that it's very kind of subject area specific. You might be using a generic tool, but if you're a subject specialist, you need to have CPD that really kind of links it to what it is you're going to be teaching. I guess it's always about context.
Anyone else got a question?
I just wanted to pick up on the international element of the project and ask what you think the benefits of doing research like this across different countries have been.
I think it really challenges your assumptions. I think we are all so fixed within our own educational systems that we don't actually realise that, again, the kind of the theoretical framework that we're in. So that's been really, really beneficial to see, you know, what's the approach in Belgium, what's the approach in the Netherlands, what's the approach in Sweden, and how is teach training done? What support is there? I mean, things like the strength of for example, municipalities and school boards across Northern Europe is much, much stronger than the kind of atomised system that we have in England. So that actually makes a real difference in terms of the professional development and the support, and kind of things like quality assurance. So where you've got a kind of overarching organisation that can do some of that quality assurance and thinking and support a community of practice. Katrina, don't you want to say a bit about the kind of intercultural, international aspect?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are many differences, especially when we visit each other's schools, but then when working on a project like this, and obviously when coming to BET, you see that teachers all over the world or in many countries work with similar tools that they have to kind of adapt to their own context. And I think that is interesting to see what happens with the different tools in different contexts, because you just can't use any tool anywhere. So I think we have learned that too from this project, really.
I think this might be our last question because time's almost out. So would you like the microphone? Just a second. It's coming.
I work for an AI company, and I'm really interested to know what sort of impact you have found with working with AI across the different schools and areas that you have, because it's something that we find quite difficult to even quantify.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we are going to talk about this in much more detail this afternoon at 3:15. Is it 3:15? We're going to talk much more about AI in education. And I think from a researcher perspective, Katrina will say that actually we don't really have the evidence yet. Don't know if you want to say something.
I mean, AI in education is a research field that has been going on for 4 decades. But it's not really until now we have the new generation of machine learning technologies and coupled with learning analytics in school. And this is not yet really research from an educational point of view, like ethnography or like there are efficacy studies, but not long-term studies. So how does it impact teachers? How does it impact students during a longer time? So I think that is a research that needs to be done.
I think that's a good question, and we're very happy to be carrying on conversations, but we've had our warning that the session's closed. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.